Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Well, howdy folks, and welcome to this video where we are going to take a look at some of the horror stories of tabletop wargaming. A couple weeks ago, I did a video on basic gaming etiquette and courtesy and politeness, and while I was doing that video, I thought, well, what's it like on the other side? So I decided to look up stories about the opposite of basic decency in gaming, and boy, I wasn't disappointed. Now, I will admit, these come from Reddit and other forums on the internet, so there's always a chance that they've been embellished or outright fabricated. But having experienced similar circumstances myself, I'm willing to believe the majority of them. So, grab something to build or paint, sit back and relax, and let's see what the gaming community at large has to offer. And if any of you have had similar stories, put them down in the comments. If I get enough really good ones, I'll make another video like this one. Because I don't know about you guys, but reading stories like this make me feel better as a person. Kind of like how every time I think that my home is super duper messy, I just watch an episode of Hoarders and instantly it makes me feel better. All right, so moving on to the first one. The first story says, had mostly good experiences, but two things stood out. One, many years ago, we were teenagers playing a small game in store and had some dude that I would now describe as a neckbeard watching us play. He made comments all the time. Some of them were good tips, so I'd play his suggestions, except for once he wanted me to move my dreadnought into combat. Well, I had other plans. From normal talking, he suddenly went to full-blown restyle screaming in a millisecond and kept yelling at me to move my dreadnought in. That was really, really weird. The other thing was basically one dude with quite lackluster hygiene playing his Death Guard on the table next to us and announcing his loud, violent farts in an unventilated room with Nurgle's blessing upon us, or something similar, and then letting rip until everything smelled like rotten eggs.
Ew.
Okay, it's understandable that some people want to help others get better, but be sparing with unsolicited advice to other players and allow folks to make their own mistakes. It's not your game, they're not your models, it's not your army. Now, as for the Nurgle player, well, that's as funny as it is gross. Folks, don't do that. But you got to admit, that's still pretty funny. And I suppose you should be glad he didn't play Khorne, or Slaanesh for that matter. I mean, who knows what he would have done in that case? If I'm playing a game, and the other player says, blessings of Slaanesh upon us, and whips out a tube of Lantman, guess what? End of game. Now with that thought in your head, let's move on to the next one. I used to work for GW as a store assistant. There was a story that went around about an incident that occurred. Two younger customers, about 12, were playing a game with the new models they'd gotten over Christmas. Just as they were putting the last few models on the table, the ceiling above them collapsed and a partially decayed body fell on the board and on their game. Supposedly, a homeless man had crawled into the air system in the ceiling earlier in the winter to escape from the cold and had died. He'd been there for a few weeks, and the store just thought the smell were the customers. Okay, this one sounds a bit fantastic, almost like those urban legends. I did a quick Google search, and there is actually a story about a homeless man who was found dead in the ductwork at a grocery store in Cleveland, but not a gaming store, and the body didn't come crashing through the roof. I'm guessing that some gamers heard the story of the actual incident and started making jokes about the smell and not being able to tell, and then the fact of the body crashing through, that was added just as the icing on the cake. Fascinating story, but I'm calling BS on this one. One guy had severe anger issues and would absolutely freak out if he lost. I was once watching my friend play against him, and my friend had an absolutely amazing roll. Like 9 out of 12 of the dice he rolled were 6s. This look came over the other guy of pure rage, like the kind that you only see in the movies. He turned beet red and started shaking and demanding the player re-roll it. My buddy, who knew this guy had a reputation and was legitimately worried he might go ballistic and flip the table or start throwing stuff, just re-rolled the dice. I sat back watching in awe. My friend ended up losing the game, and the absolute worst was that this other guy then went around bragging to the other players in the club and recounting how his brilliant tactical decisions had led him to win, and he mocked my friend for losing on top of it. We never played a game with that guy again and avoided him like the plague. Now this one, unfortunately, sounds a lot more believable because I'm sure right now everybody listening can picture who that particular person is at their own local gaming store. And if you can't think of who it is, remember folks, it's a game. And if it's not a tournament, don't lose your mind over it. Lose with dignity, win with grace. I just recently played a game against some kid, about 17, whose brother's friend and I usually play. So anyways, he wants to play against me because I played Astra Militarum and he played Chaos, and he said he really likes fighting Imperials the most. I figured, okay, he's into the narrative lore and such, that's pretty cool. So I offered to come up with a narrative backstory for our campaign, and he could help. He said, sure. But as we're brainstorming for this narrative, this kid basically reveals to me that he believes in chaos in real life, and that if I take DMT, which is apparently a hallucinogenic drug, I'll basically meet the chaos gods and see the warp for myself. He says the writers of GW must know this also, and that's why they put chaos into the lore, because it's real. He also told me he did mushrooms with his friends, and they felt that the veil got thinner, and they felt warp entities all around them. At this point, I'm just like, I really didn't know how to respond because no one ever told me if this kid had special needs or anything like that. But he was deadly serious and doesn't seem to have any issues besides that. So anyways, we proceed to play a sort of awkward game because in my mind, I know he's taking this way more seriously than I am. Eventually, I basilisk him to death, and he's about to lose. He goes, that's fine. 2 of my 4 patrons are empowered even from my losses. And he's deadly serious. No hint of sarcasm at all. I asked his brother and my friend who knows them a bit better afterwards, and apparently this kid was 100% serious.
Are you crazy?
Hey, this is Tabletop Wargaming, and it usually shares a fan base with people who LARP or folks who really get into their hobbies. This kid could have just been trolling, or he could be suffering from some significant mental issues upstairs. As long as he doesn't try and sacrifice a chicken or something in the store, I'd just let him do his thing, but I would recommend only playing him in public spaces with lots of light and multiple exits. This next one goes out to anybody who's new to the hobby or is trying to bring somebody in. My friend was trying to introduce another friend of our friends, that's a lot of friends, into the game. He seemed really excited to play and was happy to hang out with his friends. He wanted to play the Death Corps, so I loaned him some of my Imperial Guard models, and another friend, who we'll call Mr. Tryhard, made this first guy's list on Battlescribe. As the game progressed, we would suggest moves for him to make, explain rules, and so on. Mr. Tryhard, the opponent, remained silent and never spoke up when his opponent was making a bad move that we didn't notice. He would never help with forgotten rules. He wouldn't do the basic stuff to help out a noob player. By turn 3, there was a pretty clear victor, as Mr. Tryhard had nearly tabled the noob guy, who was not really enjoying himself. His normally happy attitude had turned very sullen. So after Mr. Noob conceded, Mr. Noob went home without saying a word. We then approached Mr. Tryhard and said, what the heck? Mr. Tryhard's response was, I made my list to counter his. He should learn firsthand that this is a skill-based game, and he'll lose if he doesn't master the mechanics. We, unfortunately, have never been able to get Mr. Noob to play again.
Something is wrong with you!
Now, reading this one hurts, because I've seen this happen personally. Yes, tabletop games often involve skill, and yes, you can learn a lot from losing, but it's one thing to teach a kid how to swim by throwing him in the deep end, and another thing to then jump in and hold him under the water. I wonder if Mr. Tryhard typically lost and decided to take advantage of the fact that he was playing a new player and stomp him into the ground just to boost Mr. Tryhard's ego. Or I wonder if he's just one of those players who puts winning above having basic character and decency. And I also wonder how long Mr. Tryhard stayed a part of that friend group after this particular incident. Now, this was a fairly old post, so hopefully Mr. Noob has been given another chance and has tested out the game and had a much better experience with it. Back in high school, when me and friends used to play for fun, there was that one guy in our group who was a pretty sore loser, cheated a lot, and was generally just not fun to be around. While at school one day, he asked if I wanted to play sometime, and I said, sure. We didn't make any plans, we didn't set any dates, nothing like that. I was actually just trying to blow him off. Otherwise, I would have made a specific plan. Well, fast forward to that weekend, I'm playing video games, and my little brother comes and tells me that someone's at the front door. Turns out this guy decided just to show up at my house, unannounced, ready to play. Being awkward, I just kind of rolled with it. So we go get set up and everything. What he didn't know was that I was getting really tired of him and had been reading up on how his army played. So during the game, I'm winning, and he starts lying about his stats. So I call him out on it. I then ask to see his codex, and he won't let me, like literally grabbing it and holding it so that I can't see it. We have an argument about it. He starts yelling at me in my own house. At this point, I'm over it, but I don't want him to cheat. Still, he finally yields, and we continue. I end up winning, and he, of course, was a sore loser about it. The kicker is, I had to drive him home since his mom dropped him off. I'm glad I don't see many players like him anymore.
Get in your mouse and get out of here.
Sounds to me like this guy is a teeny bit socially awkward. Taking a vague statement like, we should play sometime, as an invitation to come by that weekend unannounced, makes me think the guy might not have a whole lot of friends, and so jumps at any opportunity he can get. I actually feel a bit sorry for him because I'll bet he's in a vicious cycle. He doesn't have many friends or play very much because he's socially awkward, but without more positive interaction with friends who can help him learn how to interact, he's never going to get better at it. Hopefully, as he matures, he'll be able to work on how to behave in games and other social settings. My club was always plagued by people who came along and wanted to, quote-unquote, help. But ultimately, what they really wanted was to just install themselves and their way of play at the seat of an already dedicated and solid community. As a result, I often had the officers of the club misunderstand their responsibility to remain neutral, and many abused that power. I had certain rules I obeyed for myself, but that these other officers refused. One of these rules was never play in your own events or campaigns, except as a ringer or when extra help was needed. And the reason is because otherwise you have an unfair advantage, especially in those days when the organizer burst out the mechanics of these events. Well, the officers, after all the originals lobbied against this, and basically every time I had to relent, and the close associates won everything. This extended, at the time, to the debate about the legality of Forge World rules in 40K games. They argued, in the build-up to a campaign, final battle between two teams of 3 players, that Forge World should be freely allowed because it was a fluff-driven campaign. I argued that no one actually had Forge World models anyways, and this would be unfair because no one knew the Forge World stuff as well, and it would be a huge gotcha moment. The person who set up the campaign, and subsequently who set up an entire mechanism by which his Forge World products and models were shoehorned into the campaign, and who desperately wanted to use a Dreadnought drop pod for his Furioso Dreadnought, fought tooth and nail and managed to get the club, in its good nature, to decide that this would be acceptable. The argument that everyone lacked the models failed, and it was only allegedly going to be a onesie-twosie type thing. Well, the day of the final battle comes. Mr. Furioso and his two close associates, who crafted much of the campaign, and of course, made it to the final battle. Didn't see that one coming. But anyways, they decided they were not going to use just one of these Forge World drop pods. Oh no, they were going to use 6 of them. And the models for these drop pods? Plastic red Solo drinking cups. The other team responded by the Tyranid player gluing an alien toy onto a CD-ROM as a Tyranid Biotitan. Someone else pulled out Optimus Prime and put him on the table and said he was a warhound. And then the Imperial Guard player had a bunch of $5 toy helicopters that he used as a fleet of Vendettas. The red Solo Cups came down in turn 1. Half a dozen dreadnoughts make charges and obliterate much of the other team's front line. The rest is academic. Mr. Furioso and his guys cheer themselves like they've won the Super Bowl, and as they cruise to a foregone conclusion where they turn the whole rest of the club, extraordinarily dejected, into their personal punching bags. The campaign, from top to bottom, favored this guy and his friends, and closing out with this gut punch made the club sour on campaigns. Previously, our most positively received thing we did were campaigns, but to this point, we never ran one again. And when I tried, 4 people signed up compared to 20 previously. People, never play in your own events.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Wow, there's quite a bit to unpack here. So you've got the 2 main issues, using proxies and participating in your own events. I think there are circumstances where both are acceptable. With more games becoming model agnostic, there needs to be leeway on proxies, and I've talked about that in my WYSIWYG video. But using plastic drinking cups in place of drop pods? At an event? No, I'd say that crosses the line. Even in a casual game, that's a bit much. You should have models representing models. But at an organized event, using picnic cups in order to represent drop pods, that's going a little bit too far. Now, as for playing in your own event, I'd say it's kind of iffy. If, 1, you have the time to both run and play in the event, go for it. And 2, make sure you don't build the event in a way that favors you, which is what it sounds like that's what was happening here. Now, part of the problem was made readily apparent the moment he said Forge World. For those of you who play 40K, if you think GW is overpriced, check out their Forge World prices. Although now they've blended the 2 websites together. So go to the Warhammer website and look for anything that has the 15+ marker on it. That's Forge World stuff. And you'll notice it's a heck of a lot more expensive. That's where you'll pay $100 for a squad of 5, $120 for a Primarch, $200 for a tank. But in exchange, the rules for Forge World units are typically way stronger than regular stuff, so it's kind of a pay to win. But what these guys were doing was getting the benefit of Forge World models without having to pay to put those models on the table. It's clear they just wanted to win. I don't think the problem was playing in their own event, at least not in this case. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I feel a lot better about myself now. How about you? Do you have any stories like these? Or do you have some better ones? Put them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Until then, keep your dice on the table.